Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good, and you?
I'm fine. Can you hear me?
It's perfect.
Hmm. Hey guys, I am Inês. I'm from Brazil, and today I am with Sarah. We're gonna talking about some question because I did the content for Instagram account Yasmin. She's a journalist in England. I'm not sure if she's in London, but she invited me to talking about how is being black in Brazil. And the current I live in New York City, and she contacted me through Instagram. So we prepared some content to answer back her followers about a lot of questions who come up after when she posted the content about how being black in Brazil. So welcome to Sarah. So would you mind to introduce yourself for us, please?
No, thank you for inviting me to participate on this live. It's my first time, guys, so it's an important thing. Like I'm trying to understand all the system and all of that. So my name is Sara Branco, as Inês already introduced me. In Brazil, I'm a human rights lawyer, and pretty much what I do, I advocate for the promotion of the human rights of Black population, especially and the promotion of gender and race equality. I work for a Black organization in Brazil called CERT. CERT is the Center of Studies of Labor Relations and Inequalities. And I'm also, as because I'm part of CERT, we are in this movement called the Brazilian Black Coalition for Rights, and that's pretty much it. I would explain more about the Black Coalition as we go further in our conversation.
Yes, well, thanks for introducing yourself. So, since I'm here in United States, I've been receiving a lot of questions, not only from England, but to know how is being black in Brazil. But I think we need to start to do overview how it start, how blacks arrive in Brazil, how was the
Mm-hmm.
history about everything. So, would you mind summary us about that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. So I thought it was important to bring kind of like the main points of Brazilian history, especially like Black Brazilian history, so you can understand what's happening today in Brazil and the Black experience there nowadays. So some things that I think it's important to highlight in this conversation is that Brazil was a country that had slavery for almost 400 years. So in the Americas, it was the last country to abolish slavery. During that time, Portuguese brought, kidnapped, I would say, more than 4 millions of enslaved Africans onto Brazil. So besides the fact that we had slavery for the longest in the Americas history, we also were the ones that with the highest enslaved population brought to the country. So because of that, Brazil is the blackest country outside of Africa. So we are only behind of Nigeria when it comes to the amount of black people that lives there. Um, our abolition happened in 1888. So we have like 130 years of abolition, which means that we are a very young country when it comes to that. So we're still evolving and working on our racial relations. About England, one thing that is important to say is, besides the fact that England is, I think, is the one country, the UK, I would say, but like mostly England, is a country that played a very important role and when it comes to the slave trade and all of that. It's important to say that in 1850 was when the abolitionist movement in England got to prohibit the slave trade. So that started in 1850. So that law in England impacted the slavery in the Americas, of course, but also it's important to say that one of the main reasons why they decided to prohibit the slave trade was because the Arabics were going to Africa as well to exploit and enslave Africans there. Mm-hmm. So because of that, England was like, nope, because like there's too many people now doing this, like let's just prohibit it, you know what I mean? But they would see Arabics as a not like the same, they wouldn't be in the same level as English people, so it's like, no, that's just us, we are here, everybody else is down here. So because you're not the only ones doing this anymore, nobody can do it. So it's important to say that that law wasn't created because they felt sorry for Africans or anything like that. So going back to Brazil, we had the abolition in 1888. After that, we had a country that like 90% of the population was Black. It was at the same time that we had the racial, scientific racist ideas that would say that a country would only be successful and evolve like in 100 years if we had a white population. So based on that idea, we started creating strategies of to implement the whitening process in Brazil. So one of the main things that the country did at the time was to create immigration policies to stimulate Europeans.
One question, they started to do a plan about that, to become Brazil only white.
Exactly. So
but they had a problem because a lot of people from Africa wasn't there. So you have the majority Black in this moment, right?
Yeah, because it was like right after the abolition. So 80% of the country was Black.
And
so
this happens because the Europe pressured Brazil to stop it with the slave trade, right?
Yeah, not only Brazil, but the entire Americas. So that's when it started declining the slaves. So they still like did, like, for example, Portugal is still got to bring enslaved from Africa through like an illegal slave trade, right after the war, but they still brought some enslaved Africans to Brazil. And also, of course, during the abolition, there were those Blacks that were there were already Brazilians, because those are the generations that were born there, because 500 years. So we have a generation of enslaved people that were born in Brazil and born as slaves. So then, like, we decided, okay, so we need to make this country right. There's too many Black people here. We need to succeed. Look at Europe; they are the example of success and all of that. How do we do this? So they started like creating public policies and international campaigns to stimulate immigration, but they want a specific kind of immigrant, which would be European immigrants. So at the time, Italians, Portuguese, Spanish, English people were the ones who would be like invited to go to Brazil, and there was the idea of like, oh, there are jobs there, you can have like a property, land, like start a new life, pretty much.
So only white was invited to be welcome
to go to Brazil. Exactly.
Okay, so it's different from United States because we have another Blacks immigration in here after the slave struggle. So it's totally different. Okay.
Yeah, at that moment.
At the moment.
And especially because at the same time that that international campaign was happening to go to Brazil, here the African Americans, there was this movement, there was like the immigration movement. So like the people would leave America and either move to Africa, to like, okay, we need to go home, so the government here was also like, okay, guys, you gotta leave, like this is not your place, and all of that. And this movement here was like, okay, which country should we go? And they heard about this campaign, like stimulating the immigration to Brazil. So a lot of them tried to issue the visa, for example, to go to Brazil, and then they would be denied, because the country didn't want black immigrants. We wanted white immigrants. So a lot of African Americans couldn't even come to Brazil to visit, you know. So yeah, and then we started this whitening process. With that came the racial democracy ideology, which right now we call it the myth of racial democracy. After decades of struggle and fight, the Black movement actually got to break down the idea of racial democracy and show, like with data, the amount of the huge social inequality that we have in Brazil, and that the people who are in the bottom of the social pyramid are all Black people. You know, so we are the ones facing violence, lack of education, lack of decent healthcare, lack of access in the formal labor market and things like that. You know,
okay, I sorry, but one question: while was the immigration process about Italy and Germany people and Brazil? What happened with the Black who is not a slave anymore in this time in Brazil?
Oh,
they received some help. What's happened? For example, today I'm free. So what you gonna do? The government help?
No help. They were not seen as a labor force. They were seen as objects. So besides the fact that all this European labor force was coming to Brazil to help to develop the country, all these Black people were like literally out on the streets. So you had like a lot of Black women that would still work as housekeepers, for example. You know, so they would still work in the white people house, not as enslaved, but as a domestic worker. I'm sorry. And also for the men, so we would like do some like informal jobs, you know, but the people that received land and real job with paid salary and things like that were all Europeans. So there is like some writings that would say how the white Europeans went to Brazil and they discriminated Afro-Brazilians, you know, so there are like cases of violence committed by these Europeans in Brazil against Afro-Brazilians, and the government didn't say anything because we are not seen as people, you know, so they were trying like to get rid of us, you know, and a lot of Afro-Brazil also tried to leave to Africa, for example. There are like memories from that as well.
So a lot of foreigners come to Brazil and see nowadays the favela, the Islam, and they like so much, take a picture. So this is from this part of the history.
It's a consequence of it, I would say, you know, because, okay, so we started being like marginalized, you know. So what they start to do, okay, there's this huge population, and at the same time, like we had like the Civil War here in the United States, we had like a Haitian revolution that in Brazil we never heard about it. There was intention of us not hearing what was happening in other countries, you know. So during the dictatorship in Brazil, I think that was like the turning point, because people would still hear about like, oh, Brazil is a racial paradise. That's what we were and we still are famous for. You know, so a lot of scholars from all over the world like, okay, so we gotta go to Brazil, the racial paradise. Like, how did that work? Because South Africa didn't work. United States, we see they went to war and Jim Crow, none of that. And in Brazil, it's just everybody's quiet about it, you know. And then, but at the same time, there was already the Black movement denouncing internationally what was happening in Brazil against Black people. So the UN at the time, like in the 40s, 50s, they sent a letter to Brazilian government asking about the rate. They want like a report to understand what was happening in Brazil in terms of race. And then the government sends a letter back saying, oh, there's no racism in Brazil. We are a racial paradise. Everybody loves each other. We all mix it. Because there was the idea of like, the lighter you are, the better you are. We start like mixing ourselves, you know. So when you have a mixed country, there's this idea like, okay, we are sexually connected, and this is only one country, one culture, like the Brazilians, and that's it. There's no black and white here. But they would say how there was like poor and rich. So Brazil, we started like denying the racial debate and just concentrating on social class debate. So if you are poor, that doesn't necessarily mean like the problem. Like they would say, for example, and they still say it today. There's no racial problem. There's only class problem. So if we discuss poverty, for example, necessarily Black people will also advance and move up in the social pyramid.
Okay, that's explain why Brazil is the most no equal social nowadays.
Exactly. We are one of the country that is most unequal in the world. We have like one of the biggest social inequalities in the world. So when it comes like you asked about the favelas and all of that, there was like a project in a state project, I would say like a social project of a nation, So you exclude these people. So just like here in America, we discuss a lot about gentrification. In Brazil, for some reason, the debate around gentrification is not there. And the reason why is because it's like racial based discussion. But for example, the United States is one of the countries that put money in Rio, for example, to clean the area where is the huge lake, and it's a very expensive neighborhood nowadays there. But at the time, it would be only workers there, and of course, like workers, the majority were Black. That was like ahead in time, dictatorship and all of that. So they send money to Brazil's government to clean their area. So they start like pushing those workers to the mountains, I would say. Think about the geography of Rio. So they couldn't send them to the periphery, but they send them to the mountains so that people start like building their houses in those communities, in those areas that now are the huge favelas, But of course, that's part of a racist policy of like, okay, so where do we put these people?
Wow, that's complication. I don't have another word to describe. So, and who is outside to Brazil could help after to know that, because the information about that is so difficult to get, since who is speaking in Brazil has a color. So a lot of people ask you, wow, we are from Brazil, but we even know that we had black community in Brazil and something like that. And when they found out, everybody wants to help in some way. So do you have any ideas what they could do, or what do you think?
In Brazil, we have a very strong and powerful Black movement there. We are like very organized politically. I think like the Black movement had like huge advances and conquered a lot of things, especially when it comes to reparation policies. So affirmative action was something that we fought for more than 40 years to have. And then we finally got during like 10 years ago, we actually got the law that would say, okay, this is how we will reparate Black people for slavery, But at the same time that we have advances like that, I think what is important, and that happened as well during the racial democracy, and why we speak about class and not race, internationally, Black Brazilians became invisibles, so it's very rare, like when I travel abroad, people like, they think that I'm Jamaican or from any country in Latin America, but I'm never Brazilian, because they used to see a white Brazil. People only know the white. So when they go there, they're like, okay, this is a Black country. Like, oh my God, Brazil, there's Black people in Brazil, and we are a lot. We're like more than 54% now, So I think like a way for people that are not in Brazil to help us is like being aware and understanding the history of what happened there. I think this is one thing, and I acknowledge the fact that we are one of the most important countries in Latin America, especially when it comes to race. And we are very isolated. We are the only ones who speak Portuguese. Which makes hard for us to communicate with the rest of Latin America, the United States, and the rest of the globe, pretty much. Which I know there's a social project that was not by coincidence that we don't speak other language besides Portuguese. So this is one thing. And to answer your question, that's continue. I'm sorry, I'm taking too long, but I think there are so many important informations
Mhm.
like as I answered this question. So at the same time that we conquered social rights such as affirmative actions, for example, and even the law that legalize it, kind of thing, the domestic workers law. So we are also the country that with the highest domestic workers population in the world. And it's not by coincidence, since we are the darkest country. At the same time that we got all of that, there are a lot of violence against us there. So we are still part of this project of being exterminated, you know. So for example, nowadays in Brazil, every 23 minutes a young black man is assassinated, which means that like there is more people in Brazil than countries that are actually in war, like civil war. You know what I mean? So there's a war happening there in Brazil, and the war has a color. It's against black people. You know, there's an anti-blackness policies happening there. So I think for people that are outside of Brazil, what we always ask, and that's one of the reasons why the Black movement there created the Brazilian Black Coalition for Rights, is we want to spread the awareness. I'm sorry, to what's happening in Brazil right now, and that has been happening, of course, in decades, more over a century. That the violence, you know, that happens against us every day, all the time. So it's a strategy for us to speak about ourselves by ourselves. So we don't want no white people talking about us anymore, no white Brazilians. What we want, we need international solidarity as well. So it's important, especially people that are in the UK and thinking about how important the country is to this history of colonialism, neocolonialism, neoliberalism, capitalism, and things like that. You raising like, okay, there are black people in Brazil, they are dying. There's this anti-black policies, anti-blackness policies happening there. We need to address that, you know. So like speaking up about it, you know, denouncing, and I think you guys should keep asking nations, like sharing social medias. You know, now we have, for example, me and Inez, we live here in the United States. If it was like a few decades ago, it would be rare to find a black Brazilian outside of the country. But we are here, we speak, like we can speak English, we can communicate, you know. So I think even like you guys sending questions like that to us and giving us a space to talk about it, it's already a strategy to help us, you know. So I think like what we ask from the international community is solidarity, you know. And I think that there's no way to advance in the racial debate if only black people discuss among us, but how white people should acknowledge the privilege and white supremacy, you know, and how do you fight white supremacy as a white person? You know, I think that's how in my opinion, that's part of the racial debate. You know, white people discussing white supremacy and whiteness, and how like a lot of people die over that, you know, because of that. So that's what I would say: international solidarity and sharing, debating racial relations among white people is something very important. Sure.
Yes, the internet is a powerful tool that we have been using a lot. So I create a project about diversity. So I show the Brazilian community, black Brazilian community, how is being black in New York, and I show a lot of cases for them because we don't have a lot of representative in Brazil about our history. So don't have, for example, billionaires black in Brazil. The Forbes is totally white in Brazil. So that's difficult for us because we don't have self-confidence. So we don't believe in ourselves. Since sometimes we even don't know that we are black, because everything that shows the TV and then everything is so white. So we feel white, although we're not a white. They don't treat us as white because we don't have access a lot of space. When I arrive in Brazil, in the airport, you see the difference. So one black people is always serve, and the white is always enjoy. Depend on the place, in the restaurant, in the parks, and in here, I show that we can live, just being ourselves, just being a human. So that's kind of the project that I've been doing, but it's no easy. because we, both of us, living here legal, so, and we have a lot of things to take care. And I create for this project, Diversity, I create a Patreon. So I'm gonna put it in here, the address. If someone wanted to contribute in financial way, it will be very nice to keep this project going on, because as you realize, so many challenges that you face in here doing everything by self, by ourselves. So, but internet, as Sarah told, you can share, we can give us a space to speak and to talking about our history, but in your point of view, what's happened, because we know only one narrative about everything. And I've been receive, and Yasmin receive a lot of questions about the current president. So about how this president Bolsonaro was to leader Brazil. So what is your opinion about that?
Well, in my opinion, I think it's also part of a reaction, to a government that the Workers' Party, they made history, even though it was a party, and still is a party led by white people, white men mostly. And what does that mean, especially for us being Black women? You know what I mean? But we cannot deny that the Workers' Party, they made history when they pushed the agenda of like social rights forward. You know what I mean? So when we say like they, during that government, that Lula's administration, that they signed the affirmative actions bill, for example. So they poor people had access to credit, so they could buy like a car, refrigerator, in all of that, and also access to higher education if you were poor. We created public policies only for that, so people would access those spaces. And I think that it was like such an open government, like targeting poverty, for example, and the elites start getting mad, reacting to that. So it's like, oh, now my maid will access the airport just like me. That's not fair. You know what I mean? Now her son is gonna go to school with my son. No, that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? So I think that part of the reason why Bolsonaro is in power right now is a reaction to all those social advances that we had in the society in the past 20 years. The elites are mad and they felt ignored. Like, okay, so what about us? We are losing everything. But everything is literally privilege, So when you feel that your privilege is being threatened, you react to it, So I think Bolsonaro, he represents, and he spoke to a part of the population that was tired of all those social advances, and of course based on race as well, So people, the first thing that happened right after Bolsonaro was elected, these federal Congress woman, she issued a demand, a bill project in Brasilia, Brazil's capital, demanding that affirmative actions bill had to be canceled, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So they start like threatening all the human rights and social rights that we accessed and that we fought years like as social movement to gain. So I think the rise of Bolsonaro comes with the anger, especially the scandals with corruption on the Labour Party and all of that, So all of that created a feeling of, and also like, oh, I'm losing my privilege and all of that. So I think all of that got connected. And also it's important to highlight the fact that the evangelical churches, they start like gain power in the communities as well. So a lot of people voted for Bolsonaro are also connected to the evangelical church, which is a project not only in Brazil, but in the Americas as well. So we see those Pentecostal churches arising and going to power. So right now they're leading Brazil as well. So Bolsonaro, he's not by coincidence. He was a project. He is a project. So there is an intention why he's in government. There is a reason why he's there. So we also need to acknowledge how the left committed mistakes, and that also got Bolsonaro to power. You know what I mean? But the main reason, the roots of that are definitely on the social advance that Labour's Party created to the majority of the population.
Yes, I think you answered the question. You explain a lot, so I know it's a lot of information, even for us, because to put everything together and to make a difference between what's happening with us, like a person, and what's happening with us in a society. So it's so challenging, but I believe as we have a call socialite. So you can live better for everybody. The diversity brings us a lot of good results for everybody. So if you, as we have in the university and more diversity, more people work, you can get more search, more results. We are a lot of to offer, as we have a lot of technology in Brazil. We have Afrofuturism so strong. We have we have art martial, we have so many creative, but just keeping the same level, never go up, because we have this situation that we told about. When you put everybody in the same page is good for all the world. So that's it. Sarah, do you want to talk about something before we finish? So how is your perspective about everything? What have you been doing? So how you take care about your mental health?
It's hard. Like trying not to go crazy with all this craziness.
How you keep it calm and love everybody?
I think like for me, just I would like just to point out two things before answering that question. I'll try to be super fast. It's just that you mentioned something very important, and that I think it's worth like explaining why. You said something about how we as Black people in Brazil sometimes we don't even know that we are Black.
Yes.
And what does that mean? Because like people look at us like, but it's obvious that you're Black. Like how you don't see yourself as Black. You know what I mean? And just like to say that that's consequences of racial democracy and miscegenation, you know? So because we have a hard time talking about race, only about class, we are not, the society educated us, like prepared us, like whitewash it, our minds, not to see color, you know? So in Brazil, the base is very, like when you compare to the United States, for example, or countries in Europe, people are not openly racist. You know, they will behave a certain way, say certain things. And you as a Black person be like, oh, but why is that happening to me? But if you say, oh, you're being racist to me, people say like, no, it's not. Like I'm in a bad mood or something like that. So you're trying to run away from the racial discussion. And at the same time, as Inês said, everything's so white that you don't see yourself on the TV, but you actually don't know why you don't see yourself in TV. So it becomes like a process of naturalizing the exclusion, you know, and feeling ashamed of putting yourself as a Black person. You know, and when you do that, people be like, no, Sarah, come on, you're not Black. Don't say that about yourself. As if it was something bad. You know, so like, oh, you're smart, you're succeeding in life. So no, doesn't make sense to say that you're Black. You know, so that's something about very specific about Brazil society.
No, can I give you like a detail, like just the rainbow detail? For example, when we are look at makeup in Brazil, is very difficult to find makeup for our color. So we have to import ourselves by United States, because as we told you at the beginning, was the plan to make everybody white. So when big companies going to Brazil, that is like I don't know what's happening, but for example, we don't have a foundation for our color,
skin tone.
So I had, I can tell by myself, I have some pictures about some time ago that I was with white face because I didn't have makeup to use.
Exactly.
So it's like a plan that you are victim in everything that you own. So when you turn on the TV, when you go to read a magazine, when you go to do a makeup, when you go on a date for someone. So it's difficult you tell I am black and be proud when all the system converge for you not a black. Being black
Exactly.
is no
Right.
good. So
Exactly. Exactly.
that's it. Go ahead for your second point.
Yeah, and also the companies, because they only connect with white people when they're outside of Brazil, there's no expectation that there is black people there. And even though they know, for example, black women in Brazil, we are the biggest population.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are literally the biggest population. So you can imagine how much money we put in the economy, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And even though we are not seen as human beings, as women, so for them it's like, no, there's no need to bring like like darker foundations
Mm-hmm.
to a white country, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then those stereotypes like, oh, black women are ugly and things like that, but how am I going to take care of my body, my hair, and all of that
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have a product to take care of it, you know? So those, exactly, that's part of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I was going to say is that in this fight against black people that's happening there with the Bolsonaro government, last weekend, 5 kids, like literally kids, like the youngest was 14, 16 years old, the oldest was 23 years old, all black. They died during a police operation in
Mm-hmm.
a huge community in Brazil called the Paraisópolis,
Mm-hmm.
and doing a Brazilian funk party. So
Mm-hmm.
funk, just like hip hop was criminalized, just like samba, Brazilian samba was criminalized, and now is funk music. And so
Capoeira.
capoeira was
Mm-hmm.
criminalized as well. Now is the funk's turn, like Brazilian funk being criminalized. So during that operation, there was 5,000 people in the party. The
Mm-hmm.
police closed the main entrances, like 4 entrances, and people started running, trying to run away because they heard like shooting, and the police was like going after them, like kicking them, beating them up, and threatening them, and all of that. 9 kids ended up dead, you know, and some of them are saying that there is one specific kid that the mom is saying that she doesn't know what happened to the kid, but she knows that he wasn't killed while he was trying to run away and people stepped over him, because that's what the media is saying. Just like there's no marks on his body, there's nothing in his body that says that people stepped over him. So what happened to him? So this is what happened in Brazil right now. They're going after funk Brazilian music, which is like led and created by black people in the communities, like poor black people. This one thing. And then what was your question? I'm sorry. My perspective.
Yes,
Right?
our perspective.
I think with the advance of the far right and the rise again of the white supremacist ideas, I think things against us are getting worse again. I think we're like in a very dark place, and not only in the Americas and Caribbean or here in the United States, but also in Europe. We are seeing the rise, for example, of Boris Johnson. You know, that is very similar to Trump, which is very similar to Bolsonaro. You know, so I think like right now, what motivates me and what keeps me sane, mentally sane, is to do what I'm doing right now. You know, like to talk about it, to have like round tables about it, like have debates about it. You know what I mean? How do we create alliances, you know, among us? And it's not even about being black or indigenous, it's about being like, okay, so this is happening, they're wrong, you know, and we need to unify, because I know that like the system is harming a lot of white people as well. You know, there are only a small amount of white people that are being beneficiated by what's happening right now. You know, so I don't know. For example, in Brazil, I don't know if the left will rise again. I think the damage were too profound, so I don't see it happening in the next elections as well. And I think it's the same scenario for the United States. But I definitely think that we, as social movements, we need to keep like connecting internationally, especially, you know, being aware of what's happening in each other's country and all of that, and try like to keep bringing and creating strategy to resist not only to resist this far right forces that are rising in everywhere, but also thinking about how do we fight, like how do we fight it, you know. So that's pretty much how I see the scenario. I don't see it getting any better, but I think that any better soon. But I know that it's our responsibility to resist and fight what's happening right now, and people will be stronger when all of this is gone.
How you take care about your healthy mentality?
Besides going to therapy, I try to exercise. Sometimes I watch like crazy TV shows, which I know is a contradiction. You know, think about this thing like how it connects to capitalism, liberalism, all of that. But and I always try to be around those ones that are not like that have kind of like the same ideas as me. So those are like my
That's very
comfort
important.
zones. That's where I find affection, you know, because we deal with violence on the daily basis, like different kinds of violence, but it's still violence. So I think those are things that help me. And sometimes like reading and talking about it, I think it's important to talk about it. Even it can be negative, but sharing with our
Sure.
the ones that are like us is important to, you know, and taking care of each other. You know, and of course I gotta watch my back everywhere that I am at, you know. So that's pretty much it. Being connected with people that have like amazing energy and they are fighting for a better world.
Yes, that's at least we have perspective and we believe that we have faith. So and we can't dream about we didn't know that is possible. So I try to show the people that everything's possible, and I believe that, and I take care about my health a lot, and myself caring a lot, and I do that in my social media for our Black Sea. I take care about me is a way to say that I
Exactly.
love myself, and the beginning about everything is you love yourself. I know we have a problem, the global problem, but we are persons, so we have to take care about ourselves
Exactly.
and love a lot, and I play a lot. I run. I do a lot of activities. I watch Netflix, like unicorns, Pokemon.
Exactly. Yeah, just like to turn our minds off sometimes.
Yes, turn my mind off a lot of times. I listen music. Yeah, I bought a guitar and I'm trying to play, and that's
Exactly.
it because we are human. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It was amazing.
And
Thank you.
thank you a lot for who is watching that, and thank you special for Yasmin to invite me to talking about us.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So till next time, you guys. Bye bye.
Bye, guys. See you.